Welcome back, 365 Sports on your Friday. Paul Catalina sitting smokeless today as they are off doing high school football. And Connor O'Gara of Saturday Down South joins us now. And Connor's going to join us about every other week. You know, he's in demand. Saturday Down South is, you guys are kind of pioneers in the let's have fun with college football reporting space, where you guys do great journalistic work, but you have a lot of fun with it. Before we even get started, like, how that's got to be kind of a difficult balance to make between what you guys are doing, because sometimes it's easy to veer off into being like maybe having too much fun and not doing the great work, but you guys find a nice balance with it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's something that we pride ourselves on at Saturday Down South. It's one of the reasons why I've been at this company now. This will be my 10th season with our company, originally on the Big Ten side, and then doing a little bit more of the hybrid stuff, kind of like 2017, and, you know, have been obviously locked into all things SEC for a while now. And yeah, the freedom that we get is tremendous. You know, I have bosses that tell me, hey, you know, we love when you can actually sit there and break down, you know, a matchup and do all that stuff. But also, if you want to write about why there's a certain, you know, what every SEC team's current country song would be to describe them, then you have the freedom to be able to do that. So I'm very grateful. We've been doing this since 2010. And for those that have consumed our content, I hope they feel exactly the point that you just emphasized, of trying to have fun with college football and also trying to inform and be on top of as much of it as possible.
Well, we'll end with the big game for the SEC this week, which will be Texas and Michigan. We'll wrap up on that one. I don't want to bury the lead. I do think it is an interesting week. Now, a lot of teams have their, you know, FCS game or whatever. You know, Georgia plays Tennessee Tech and A&M plays McNeese and things like that. But there are some very intriguing games inside the conference this week. I'm curious your thoughts on Arkansas and Oklahoma State, as Talon Green, super athlete, now taking over at quarterback there as KJ Jefferson's at UCF. Obviously it was just Pine Bluff last week, but he looked super athletic. Sam Pittman's backed into the corner. If not for Billy Napier in Florida, then he might have the hottest seat in the entire country overall. How do you feel that Arkansas will respond to going to Stillwater and playing what will be a very fundamentally sound team that's going to run right at you at Oklahoma State?
Yeah, that's it right there. You have to be able to make life difficult for Ollie Gordon II, which obviously easier said than done to do that against the best running back in college football. But the numbers dictate that if you can try and limit his efficiency, then obviously that's going to give you a much better chance to be able to win against an Oklahoma State team that doesn't want to throw the football 35 to 40 times a game. That's not what they want to have Alan Bowman doing. And this is an Arkansas defense that I think last year actually performed really well. Travis Williams did a fine job as the Arkansas defensive coordinator, inheriting a unit that was just in shambles the year prior under Barry Odom. And so now, what does it look like in this matchup on the road with the defensive line for Arkansas that should be the strength of this team? I think a lot of people need to know the name Landon Jackson, somebody that's been huge in trying to establish that defensive culture. Can you contain Ollie Gordon? Because if you can't, this game is going to be over before Arkansas fans can say woo pig. But the reality is, this is still an Arkansas offense that should be able to do some things this year. And Talon Green, you know, TBD, if he's going to be able to cut down on those mistakes. It looked unbelievably promising in the opener in his debut with Bobby Petrino. But doing so on the road in that atmosphere is a different story. He's going to get to go against an Oklahoma State pass defense that has a lot of questions to answer after it really struggled last year. So I do think it's just a difficult matchup when you realize that the toughest player to stop is probably going to get the football upwards of 30 times in the game. But yeah, this is still an Arkansas team that is going to just have tons of eyeballs on it with the Sam Pittman situation.
It's amazing how fun Bobby Petrino's offense looks when he gets to call his own plays. And not just go from the like Jimbo playbook. You know, that's the only thing Jimbo changed was who was actually calling it in, not the actual plays last year. I agree with you on Arkansas. Very, very, very curious to see how they go. I mentioned that hot seat. Now, Florida's playing Samford this week. And so that normally, even with, the struggles, should be kind of a behind the, we wouldn't even talk about it. But DJ Lagway making his debut as the starting quarterback, if he plays well over the weeks, I think there's reasonable belief that you'll never see Graham Mertz take a starting snap for the Gators again.
I disagree.
Oh, really?
I think Billy loves him some Graham Mertz, and I think he wants to do right by him. I think that while all of us understand the situation and understand the sense of urgency that Florida needs to have, I do think that when Graham Mertz is healthy, he will be the starting quarterback. Everything that Billy has said and done related to that position has indicated that DJ Lagway is trying to work his way into this thing, but it's not necessarily his job to lose. And if he comes out and performs extremely well over the course of the next couple of weeks, who knows if he's going to get to be able to start against A&M or something like that. And if he looks the part, then there will be a lot of people clamoring for him. But Billy is going to go with his experience. Like that's just what his MO has been and what he has maintained this entire offseason. He brought Graham Mertz to media days. Mertz has handled himself extremely well. He is the leader of that program. And while I think it's so intriguing to look at Lagway and what he does with this opportunity and try and connect those dots, I just don't think that's the way that Billy is approaching this. And I do think that Graham Mertz, as long as he's not dealing with long-term concussion issues, I think he will be still slotted in as QB1 when he returns to action.
Last week was not a resounding game for them at all. With Florida being so bad against Miami at home, it can't help him at all going into this year where the schedule's already really bad. He's recruited well, Billy Napier has, but that has not paid off yet. How much further down the hole did he get after that game? Because the gap between them and Miami looked huge.
A lot. I mean, whatever narrative you were using to defend Billy Napier this offseason, you watched that season opener game and you shut your mouth. Or you went to the other side and said, we're in trouble if we're Florida. We're very much looking at a situation that doesn't feel like it's getting better. And that's the thing is that, you mentioned the recruiting. He has recruited well. He's had the resources. Everybody talked about that picture that Florida took his first year and how beefed up the support staff was. They have invested in Billy Napier, and sooner or later, you've got to be able to go out and make plays on a football field. That's what this job comes down to. And Billy Napier is still of the belief that he needs to be calling plays. I disagree with his decision to do that. You saw it play out in the season opener where the best play that they ran all day, they didn't even come back to it with Montrell Johnson. And you're like, what is Florida doing with 8 months to prepare to be that far away from Miami? I picked Florida to win that game. And I don't necessarily think this is going to be a type of season which Florida quiets the doubters, but I still picked Florida to win that game. I thought the Miami hype had been overblown, and it turns out Miami was ready to go. I mean, Miami was the better team, and even as it was kind of holding tight to that lead early on, I still thought the Hurricanes looked like they were pushing Florida around in the trenches. And that's the issue, is that you see this apathy right now, and Florida having that place clearing out in the middle of the second half is such a bad sign for the future of the Billy Napier era. And to me, that was a sign of a guy that is just lost. He doesn't have the answers. And for someone that came in telling everyone that he had the answers to be able to clean up the Dan Mullen mess, it certainly doesn't look like it early on in year 3.
My impression of the Dan Mullen mess was that clearly he didn't want to spend as much time recruiting as the modern coach does. And it didn't look good that their second biggest rival in Georgia, or 1 and 1A with FSU, was the best team in the country, had overtaken Alabama. So it's going to look even worse when you're looking at a rival, and they are the picture of college football excellence right now. So why has he not been able to match that with him? Is it just it's the on-field coaching that's the thing, and that's about it?
Yeah, I mean, there's not buy-in.
Yeah.
There's clearly not. Like, you can't tell me the way that Florida has showed up in these season openers the last 2 years and just been a disaster on that offensive line. That's the most stunning part. That was what Billy was selling, was that we're going to be a team that beats you in the trenches. We feel really good about our ground game, and we're going to be able to establish that identity. And then we're going to have someone like a Graham Mertz, or, obviously a DJ Lagway is a little bit different than that, but that can come in and make smart decisions, and we're going to move the chains, and we're going to be, an efficient, effective offense. And they have not been that. To me, the on-field issues have been evident. I mean, the discipline, like not having, the number threes figured out last year's opener. This year they have the roughing calls that are costing them, and it's just a team that doesn't look like it's prepared, and that is so troubling. That comes directly back to the head coach. Billy's not even making excuses anymore. There's not even a spin zone coming. He's like, yeah, we got embarrassed. Yeah, you got embarrassed. Like you personally. This is an indictment of the job that you've done so far, and it's certainly been not worthy of that contract that he received.
One of the games I think is not getting enough pub this week is Tennessee and NC State in Charlotte. NC State, Grayson McCall's there. Looks like he's going to have a fun time in the offense. Probably the most talented quarterback, even maybe at least college-wise, maybe even so much so more than Devin Leary that Dave Doran has had there at NC State. But can they close the gap on what is likely to be like a week after week coming out party for Nico Maliava?
I don't think NC State will. I think the tempo is going to give them problems. And for all the discussion about Nico Maliava and the performance he had in week one, albeit against FCS competition, but being just as good as Tennessee fans could have hoped for in that season opener. He really was. For all the talk about him this week, I think we're going to see Tennessee come out and really try and establish that ground game, because that's been the Josh Heupel MO. Mm-hmm. And you have the pieces up front to be able to force NC State into spots that they're not used to being in. And they're still trying to figure out who they are defensively without Peyton Wilson, last year's Butkus Award winner. And they're trying to show that they weren't just him, and that they were a team unit, and they felt they were disrespecting the offseason. I don't necessarily think they're going to be able to play 4 quarters with this Tennessee offense. I think it ends up being a pretty good game, but I think Tennessee's offense, you're going to see them truly lean on that ground game. And Dylan Sampson, if you don't know the name now, you will by the time that game ends, because I think he's in for a big time performance with all eyes on Nico, all eyes on this Tennessee passing game. I think he's the one that's going to benefit the most. So I do think it's going to be a difficult task for NC State. Tennessee's a touchdown favorite for a reason in this one. And I do think that they have probably more offensive firepower than they had last year. Not probably, definitely. I mean, I don't really think there's much of a question about that. And they have the guy in Nico to be able to maximize that.
What's your assessment of the long-term future of LSU this season? Do they have problems they can't solve, or was the USC game something that Brian Kelly can eventually get fixed?
I think it's an 8-4 football team. And I said that coming into the year. Now I picked LSU to beat USC. So maybe they're going to be even less than an 8-4 football team. But I actually came away encouraged with most of the elements of LSU. If you told me going into that one, hey, USC is going to have 20 points up until the final drive of that game, I would have been like, wow, that's a really good sign for this LSU defense with Blake Baker after they were just a disaster last year. If you had told me, hey, Garrett Nussmeier, he's going to make a lot of big time throws, he's not necessarily going to make those gunslinger mistakes, and he's going to look like the guy that we saw in the bowl game with his win against Wisconsin, I'd be like, hey, that's a really good sign. But you see the struggles that LSU has down the stretch, and they just don't have that killer instinct. That's what really set Brian Kelly off in that post-game press conference when he's pounding the podium and he's all upset. And it's like, well, part of that is also on you as a head coach, because LSU's time management, even down the stretch, where they should have been able to take more time off the clock for USC after, they kicked the game-tying field goal, and USC has plenty of time to be able to march down the field and just put together a scoring drive. And that's ultimately what they are able to do. So I think some of that has to come back to Brian Kelly, and then it has to come back to this offensive line. Heard all offseason, this is going to be one of the best offensive lines in all of college football. Will Campbell, Emory Jones, these guys are great. They ran the ball 6 times for 3 yards in the fourth quarter against USC, against a Lincoln Riley coach team. Now, I understand Danton Lynn is doing some great things there as a defensive coordinator, one of the up-and-coming coaches in the entire college football landscape. But to me, that was such a bad sign for LSU. And then they lose John Emery to a torn ACL, the guy who ran harder than anybody in that LSU backfield in the opener. I think that's probably the more troubling thing, because a lot of those other elements, I think that's going to play. And I think that's going to be something that helps them this year. But seeing them struggle in the trenches down the stretch, not be able to kind of step on the throat, show that killer instinct, that's probably the most troubling thing with a difficult schedule that LSU has.
Our LSU-loving producer, Garrett, nodding his head the entire time.
You nailed that, man. You nailed that, Connor.
Absolutely in total agreement with you. All right, let's wrap up and talk for a couple minutes about Texas and Michigan. I'm a little bit disappointed that Michigan is kind of in the offensive state they are right now with not knowing – really what they're going to do at quarterback week to week. I mean, it looks to me, I know Davis Warren's the guy, but they really would like it to be Alex Orji, and it's not. And I feel like that's a situation that could kind of linger as if their offense struggles, especially against a defense that should be as good as Texas this week. Normally, I would think this game would be closer, but Texas, given what they have, what they are going into Michigan, this might be a pretty disappointing day in the big house for the Wolverine faithful.
I think it will be. I think Texas wins this game by double digits. I would be really worried if I'm a Michigan fan about this offense because the quarterbacks, that's going to be the most popular topic of discussion all week. It's a very unsettled quarterback situation. We see Alex Orji get into the game. He ends up playing 9 snaps. Jerome Moore says that he's going to be able to have an expanded role and he's going to play more. But the problem to me isn't just that. Donovan Edwards, the guy that was on the cover of College Football 25, 11 rushes for 27 yards in this game. That's not great. And if you tell me, the offense was really basic, they just tried to keep things simple. It's against Fresno State, and you're at home with 8 months of buildup, season opening game, and Donovan Edwards finally healthy, apparently. And to have that kind of showing, it made me think this Michigan team is going to struggle to find an offensive identity. And go back to last year, week 2, Texas going on the road, facing a top 10 team, certain top 10 team that's trying to find an offensive identity, trying to figure out what it has, the quarterback situation. And what happens? That team struggled. That team was Alabama. And we saw Jalen Milroe throw multiple interceptions in that game. And then he gets benched, whatever you want to call it. Alabama was figuring out its quarterback position the week after against USF. But Texas was able to expose an inexperienced offense and did so in their house. And I think in the big house, we see a repeat of that. I think Pete Kwiatkowski, who I always struggle to be able to pronounce his last name, I just call him PK. I think he's one of the better defensive coordinators in the country. And I think even without Sweat and Murphy up front, they have so much experience on the back end. And this Texas secondary, I think they're going to force multiple turnovers when Michigan's going to be in some of those obvious passing situations. I think that's the biggest mismatch in this game. And a Michigan offense that just doesn't have that identity established with all of that turnover, I think they really struggle. And it's Texas flexing a bit defensively. That's going to be the difference in this one. And the Longhorns win on the road, double-digit week 2 victory again.
Yeah, they historically, and we know this from Big 12 country, when things turn around for the Longhorns, like whenever it is, when they come out of the dark times, not only do they come out of the dark times, but the things that should knock them back are kind of classically not as strong. Alabama last year could have, normally that's a team that we're feeling good about ourselves in Austin. And no, you're not here. You go and win in Tuscaloosa. Same thing this year in Michigan, defending national champions. And here comes Texas, and Michigan, pretty much that whole team is gone from a year ago. So they, sometimes you better be lucky than good, and they are now both.
Yeah, I mean, the timing of this worked out so well for Texas. The timing of their year 1 schedule in the SEC as a whole just couldn't have worked out better. I mean, Texas in SEC play will face 2 teams in the SEC that won 8 games last year. Meanwhile, poor Oklahoma is sitting over there with an SEC schedule that's got 6 opponents in the SEC that won at least 9 games last year. I mean, it's night and day what these 2 teams have to deal with year 1 in the SEC. And I'm not saying that it's some conspiracy theory and trying to do right by Texas. It just worked out that way. And it worked out extremely well. If you're going to win a national championship in the 12-team playoff era, you're going to look back and say, we got lucky at certain points. And some of that is going to be injury luck, which I would argue to this point, Texas has been really unlucky with the injury luck, with having the 2 injuries in the backfield. And I do kind of question if that's going to limit them with their national championship odds, because I thought CJ Baxter was going to lead the SEC in rushing this year. So I was devastated to see him go down. But, you do need to catch breaks like this. And maybe this is the type of break for Texas where it's a win against Michigan that all of a sudden, like, it makes their schedule, their strength of schedule even better. Maybe it allows them to get away with 9-3 to be able to get into the playoff or something like that. I think they'll be better than 9-3, but the timing of this matchup, it just couldn't have set up better for Texas. And I think that the Longhorns are able to look like the more experienced team in Ann Arbor.
Connor, thank you so much. Appreciate it, guys. If you've not read Saturday Down South and gone and follow them on Twitter and go to the website, you're missing out on some of the best college football coverage that there is. Plus, they just have a blast doing it, which this is fun. It's supposed to be fun. I feel bad for poor Ross Dellinger most days because he is one of the most fun dudes I know, but like his now lot in life is reading about writing about the NCAA and how it's collapsing. But you guys really do have fun in all that stuff, and love having you on, and we'll talk again in a couple weeks.
Sounds good. Really appreciate the kind words, man.
Yeah. Connor O'Gara with us here from Saturday Down South. He'll be back with us in a couple weeks. This is 365 Sports.